wanted to bring something a little bit new to everyone, so I thought I'd try out a little bit of animation on this video. You'll be able to see it here and there in a few select bits. So once again I'm using my little stand device and I'm carving this character called Luca. I haven't seen the movie that this character is in, but I saw his face when I saw a million different adverts flying around, and I thought it just seemed like a really nice thing to try and carve. So I thought I'd give it a go. I'm really into faces, and this is the first time I've tried to kind of copy a caricature face, I suppose, like a sort of animated face that I've seen. So what I'm doing here is just breaking out the corner so that I can use the V-chisel. And the reason for breaking out that corner is because when I do this cut along here, which is across the grain, it doesn't blow out the end of the wood. If I hadn't cut that corner out there and then attempted to do this cut all the way across, then it would break out that corner and I'd probably lose the part of the head that I didn't want. I did actually make the template for this piece the right size so that it would fit the piece of wood that I had. So I use a program called CorelDRAW. You could use any kind of program that has measurements on it, and I set it to 4 centimeters wide, so you see from the nose to the back of his head there is 4 centimeters, because that's how wide the piece of wood was. So it means that I have less wood to cut off from the very starting piece that I have. And I think maybe that's overlooked sometimes in carving, because sometimes you might, I mean, I guess it depends which way you want to go there, but personally I like to try and size the carving so that there's as little waste wood as possible, which also saves time, so it's kind of like a double whammy, I suppose. Now you can see I've done the same cut there, and I'm just planning out where the bottom of the hair is and the nose. So I'm just using the V chisel again, which is a chisel I use very, very often, but you do have to keep your eyes on it because it's quite fun to cut with, and also it cuts deep quickly. I switched to a small gouge there, but it also cuts deep quickly, so if you're not careful you can sometimes go a bit deep and suddenly you have a big long line where you don't want it. You know, but such is the nature of carving, you kind of have to watch yourself all the time, especially when you know you're getting close to that final line. Now I'm using a big file gouge, and it's quite big for this purpose, but I found it quite good just to trim lots of little things. And now a little file gouge, a small one, with a more severe sweep, just to take out that material on the cheek going towards the ear and below the hair. And what I'm using here is Limewood. It's genus or family, I'm not sure how you say, is Tilia, which is the same as Basswood. Limewood and Basswood are basically the same thing as far as I know. One grows in North America, one grows in Europe. But I guess I normally call it Limewood because that's how I buy it. In the UK I buy Limewood. So now I'm just sorting out the nose with a small gouge and then the eyes with a different gouge. This is one of the ways where it helps to have lots of different size gouges because they're really good for detail work, and also if you have something like this which requires a curve all the way around, yeah, you can do it with a different gouge and you can kind of do some slicing cuts, but it helps to have something that's really close to the shape or the exact shape that you're cutting out. I feel like that makes things a bit more accurate, maybe saves a bit of time, but once again it depends on your carving style. Now I'm using a fairly flat chisel just to make the eyes into, I guess, domes. You can see there they're kind of like domes. Having to imagine the eye as a ball inside the head is a really weird thing when you first start carving eyes. But once you think about it as an eyeball and the fact that we're only seeing one small portion of it out of the front between the eyelids, then it starts to make a bit more sense. You can kind of, that's how I like to imagine it anyway, you know, think about the ball inside the head and just the small part that you're seeing. The ears I'm doing with another flat chisel, but it might be one with a really low sweep, so like a very slight curve. And this chisel also has curved edges, or curved corners I should say, which means that you can cut into the wood without having any tracks from the corners. also make their way into the wood, which can be really invaluable, especially if you're like clearing some space where you don't want there to be lots of marks and stuff that you have to clean up later. And just a smaller gouge to signify where, I actually didn't know what that part of the ear is, but if anyone knows the name of that part of the ear, let me know. The little piece that sticks out basically over the front of the canal, just to signify that. Now the hair was one of the hardest parts, and I really wasn't expecting it to be so hard, because I wasn't really thinking about it. I was really focused on making the little nose and the eyes as close as I could to what they should be, and so I didn't really think about the hair. But I got all the basic shaping done, and then I used my drill just to cut here where there's like a little kind of, like a curl, I guess. It's not really a cowlick, is it? Just like a curl of hair. But the problem when you drill like that is that it looks like a drill hole, right? So then you have to do like this, come with a chisel and shape it and clean out of it, because otherwise it does just look like a perfectly round drilled hole. You know, you might be going for that look, but since we're trying to make a more kind of organic looking hair kind of look, I felt it needed to be shaped a bit more on the inside of that hole to make it look less like a perfect circular hole. So as I went on, that's what I did. Now again, I'm using the big file chisel, the really shallow gouge, to clean lots of bits out. It's really good for that because it stays nice and sharp, and you can do lots of little small cuts with it. You know, I use it a lot for cleaning up big surface areas and also smaller areas like that, so it's quite a versatile chisel considering its size. Now I'm working out the curls of the hair, which is quite difficult. This is just like the first, we've already done the first stage of the hair here, which was to just get the basic shapes. Now what I'm doing is isolating the curls, so now I'm having to cut all these curls and cut in behind them like they're like a little undercut to make them stand out. And then I had to try and figure out which curls were above other curls, so in this case that curl there was above the curl that I'm doing now, which is why it's kind of undercut from the one that I did. So I had to make all the little curls, and then later on I have to draw or carve all the lines in the hair as well, which just adds that extra little bit to it, just another little bit of texture to add to it. This is the mouth. It's pretty simple. Usually I fear mouths because lips are really difficult for me anyway, but this one was just trimming a little hole in there, because that's just what it was, a little smile. If you find a picture of Luca, you'll see that's how his smile is, just a little cartoon smile. So now from this angle it's looking pretty close to what I want it to be. I had to saw in there just to cut this part away. I could have chiseled it, but in a sense cutting across the grain and then chiseling down so that you're splitting the wood away is a more efficient way to do it, and it's just another case of using the weakness of the wood against itself in a sense, you know. So basically what I'm doing right now is the same thing. I've cut in there a little bit and I'm just using the chisel with the grain, and that means that it just snaps out, and that's the weakness of the wood, the fact that the grain snaps like that when you push the chisel in there. Now another case when I use the big chisel in there to trim some stuff away, I had to control that cut a little bit, so I was putting my hand right against the work and not letting the chisel move too much, because if I did push too hard and let it move too much, then I would have chiseled straight into his face, which is something I did not particularly want to do. Which, you know, obviously has happened before, so I have to learn from it. Now using that nice little flat chisel again, just to clear up the shirt. And I didn't really know what I was going for there, I just sort of tried to make it look the way it looked on the drawing or on the picture. Here I am doing the lines and little curves. You can see I've made loads of them already in the hair. You could also possibly do that with a V chisel, but because of the way you're cutting in there, the grain direction changes so many times doing those curves. I feel like it's a better way to do it, to make that kind of slicing cut we were making there. So you could do it with like a knife. In this case I chose this small chisel from a pretty cheapy chisel set. Then it came to the painting. I used acrylics and I knew that I was going to be able to layer things up. So I started with this kind of orangey, fleshy sort of tone. I guess it's like a cartoony, fleshy tone. And I could see when I was painting it that it wasn't the final face colour that I wanted, but it was kinda close. So I layered up on it a little bit with some pinks and some whites, just to make it sort of a bit less orange and a bit more like the colour of Luca's actual skin. So, which was kind of tricky, and I'm painting over the eyes and everything, which I'm not really worried about at this moment. Then I used this kind of nice blue for the shirt, and I guess the good thing about acrylics is that you can just paint them on top of each other, right? And this is another technique I like using. You paint a little bit of paint on and then dab it with your finger, or rub it around, and that just makes it fade in a little bit. Like you can see how I've done it on his nose. I didn't want his nose to be super duper pink, but a little bit pink like it is in the picture, and his cheeks as well. So you're just taking a bit of paint away with your fingers. You could do it with tissue paper as well, probably, but there's something about using your fingers which I think makes it more enjoyable, maybe. I don't know. And his lips were the same nice pink colour, and you can see I've faded the skin tone as well, so I added a kind of whitey pink to the face just to scale it down a little bit, and that helped take away a bit of that like harshness. There is another thing about lime wood you have to consider, in that it can really soak things in, so you might have to do a few layers to get the desired effect of a few layers of paint to get the desired effect, because lime wood really sucks in whatever you put on it, whether it be oil, paint, whatever. It really sucks it in. So these acrylics worked actually really well. They're just basic, like poster paints, I guess you'd call them, like stuff a kid would use in school. Just those cheap kind of paints that you use. I mixed up a nice brown to put on the hair. I did actually add some highlights to the hair afterwards with a kind of lighter brown, but I found I didn't need it. I actually put them on there and then I took them back off. I tried to rub them off, which helped, because it just didn't look right. I'm not sure why, but because I've carved all these curves and stuff in the hair, and all the little curls where I've got the chisel really deep, it means that the paint sinks into those little cuts, and it actually gives it that dark appearance. If you look between every cut, there's like a dark appearance where the paint has soaked in a bit more. So this was the hardest part. You might be able to tell I'm using an incredibly tiny brush, and it's good to have all these points of contact. So holding it with one hand and then using my little finger on my right hand there to hold it steady while I paint with that hand, while I paint with the same hand, and that helps just to have the point of contacts to keep things steady. And that works in carving as well. If you're carving something and it's sort of a really delicate thing, if you put your hand against it that's holding the chisel, then that can really help in keeping the chisel steady and straight and firm. And this is the final result. I added some little freckles as well with you can see the freckles there, with a skewer, a barbecue skewer. I just dipped it in some brown paint, dabbed it on a tissue a few times, and then just lightly touched it on the face a couple of times. And the reason I picked blue for the base is because in the movie Luca turns into some kind of a sea creature when he's in the water, so I thought that was quite fitting. And yeah, I had a lot of fun making that. I hope you had fun watching the video and spotting the couple of animations that I chucked in there. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Like the video, share it if you like, that helps me a lot. And I'll catch you again next time.